Hello world, good day and good game. Last week we looked a little bit at Dangerous Ambush, but then fell into a deep rabbit hole of what is immobilized and what not. And we found so much different stuff that I want to sum this up in one video here. First, let's look at Dangerous Ambush. This thing fills an often empty damage buckets, and also it is a boost, so when you look at the damage formula, then this fills up the base boost down here. And if you don't have stuff like power increase, then this bucket is empty, so Dangerous Ambush will pump up your damage by almost 50% then. Well, 24.9% if the enemy is not targeting you, which can be very hard against the Colossus, because if you're in a cone in the side of the Colossus, then that already counts as targeting. What we are looking for is immobilized, which gives almost 50% base skill power boost. That is what we want. But immobility doesn't always mean that the enemy cannot move. The enemies can still move. And it's also not immovable, which you experience when you're using Sharen's 4th skill or plenty other skill where you cannot move. Immovable is a different thing. And also it's very important that a debuff causes immobile to trigger the Dangerous Ambush, or some effects causes immobile to trigger Dangerous Ambush. The stupid simple rule is stagger the enemy and it works. But wait, there's more. It is just a category with many variations and conditions. Yep, we look at all of them, how you get more damage. Let's start with the simple stuff like Knockback. You see this very often and is written everywhere. You see the enemy steps back a little bit, which takes 1 second where you can trigger Dangerous Ambush. That is the easy one that everyone knows. Same with Knockdown. That is when a Colossus gets on his knees after you destroy the weak point or you stress it enough with some damage. Then you have like 10 seconds to hammer your Dangerous Ambush buff on him. Another stupid simple one is Freeze. That is an obvious immobility, and also the enemy cannot move. So those are the easy ones where you really see the enemy cannot do anything, so it must be mobile, so Dangerous Ambush works. But then there's Chill. With Final Masterpiece, almost every Descendant can achieve Chill, because the effects that Final Masterpiece has is applying the chill state on the enemy, just the right one to trigger Dangerous Ambush. That is the first example of the enemy can still move, but Dangerous Ambush works. Yeah, the game is strange, right? More obvious example is a simple stun like Ajax with Voidwalker and others. Toes, we will look at those. There are guns that can stun, and also Ultimate Luna can stun too. For Toe, Nell can do that with her 3rd skill, pulling all the enemies together. That is one kind of stun. Shadow can do that too. Harris also tows the enemies together with her 1st skill. Ajax can tow enemies with the 1st skill when you use Barrier Charge Explosion. And Khulan recently got the Septic Turbulence, which also pulls enemies together. Every time you tow an enemy, that is a stun, which counts for immobilize. So the full power of Dangerous Ambush would be active while you do those things. And then there are also simple stuns like Ajax Void Walks, the 2nd skill when you jump on the enemies and they are stunned. Oh, and another toe example is Daya when she uses the Clash while carrying enemies, so you not only want to dash through the enemies, you want to get back to the enemies and pick them up. And then the classic example with Avalanche, that is a classical toe. Gley can also stun, but that is something that we rarely use, because she can only stun when she's not in frenzied mode, and we like the frenzied mode pretty much, don't we? Here the Magnetic Bulwark, the 2nd skill of Kyle, inflicts also stun, and Luna can stun too. We will hear Luna a couple of times. She can stun with Passionate Stage. When you debuff the enemy with Dopamine Addiction, that inflicts the stun then. And this then of course enables you to use the full power of Dangerous Ambush. Sharen, another example, the 3rd skill, when you throw the shock nuts on enemies, then you inflict stun on them. But also there are weapons that can stun. For example, the Albion Cavalry Gun. The ricochet of this weapon stuns the nearby enemies. Or more like every enemy that gets hit by the ricochets gets also stunned. And this then enables the full power of Dangerous Ambush. And a rarely used weapon that could be really good on Bunny perhaps is the Hive Master, because the Hive Master has shock bugs that stuns enemies within range. And this stun also activates Dangerous Ambush full power. That is why I think it could be really nice for Bunny or any other wildly gunning Descendant nowadays. And the very first stun you experience in this game is the Grapple Hook. When you grapple enemies, then they are in some kind of stun, some kind of immobility, which would be enough to enable Dangerous Ambush, but well, as long as you're grappling them, you're not really doing any skill damage or something. And the most interesting part was that the weapon impact stuns or immobilizes enemies. That is a crazy one, and no one is using this right now. Just to be clear, I'm not talking about advantage type. No, that is something completely different than the advantage type. A simple weapon hit can trigger your Dangerous Ambush. How crazy is that? If you want to know which weapon is good for which enemy, then join the stream, tell me about the enemy, and we go into the lab and take this long test of which weapon is good for this enemy to trigger your Dangerous Ambush. Another big topic is enemies that are some kind of staggered but not really. I would consider calling this the dazed, groggy or reeling state, and the easiest example is the Administrator. We see him dazing, groggy, reeling very often. We put this in a special category here because this is also bound to some mechanics, also activates some other debuffs on the enemy, which can give you double the damage even when you don't have Dangerous Ambush. For example, the Tyrant Spike Spider, when you destroy the core, then she is immobilized for 7 seconds.
Oh, here we
destroy
are.
the core and she shows her
how
belly.
It looks like.
Same for the Tyrant Void Gunner, when you destroy the core, then this dude is 4 to 5 seconds just in some immobile state where you can get the full damage of Dangerous Ambush. The Tyrant Spike Pincer also has an armor. When you break it, then it immobilizes for 3 seconds here. But more interesting are the bigger enemies like Corrupted Goroth in Onslaught. When you destroy the unstable bomber that he spawns, he falls into melting and then he's down for some time. The dude you always see in Onslaught 3 is Corrupted Gramoth. When you destroy the ball that he's trying to make, then he also gets dazed, and as long as he's like that, he gets double damage and also activates your Dangerous Ambush. That's a lot of damage. Khulan has something that you won't see in public lobbies that often. When you escape his hook, like here, I'm just hiding, and suddenly when he cannot grab you, then he is immobilized for 5 seconds only, so you gotta be quick, and also during that time he gets double the damage and activates your Dangerous Ambush. Ledras does some totems, and as soon as they are gone, he gets immobilized for 10 seconds, gets double the damage, and he no longer can ignore your criticals multi-hit and has low resistances. Sigvore is someone that is a bit harder and also doesn't work that well in public lobbies, because when you kill his weakness clone, then he's dazed for a moment for 10 seconds, gets double the damage, activates your onslaught. That is how you kill him. But if you hit one of the other clones, then he gets a buff for that. That is a bit harder to kill then. And that is not something new that I'm showing you here. This is in the game like forever. For example, with the follower shield. When you break their barrier, then they are down for 4 to 5 seconds. Yeah, I had some fun with those two dudes here. Well, okay, we have so much damage nowadays that they will die anyway. But that is just to show you how long this has been a thing and activating Dangerous Ambush over and over again. A newer example is the Administrator, and if you don't destroy his turret, please do. Don't shoot the Administrator, shoot the turret first. Then he's dazed for a moment, gets 80% increased damage for the next 7 to 8 seconds, and in that time also your Dangerous Ambush would be active. That is how you can kill him. Also, the Sculptor is an easy damage, but also want to show this here that if you break the immunity barrier, he gets the protocol neutralization for 10 seconds, which is just immobilized, activating Dangerous Ambush and so on. So this is all about disabling the enemy in some kind of way. Also, there are moments like Chill where the enemy can still move. And we also have the Charm. With Charm, the enemies can still move, maybe not that fast, but they already count as immobilized. You have that on Nest Devotion. When you hit the enemy with this debuff here, then they are getting slower, and that Charm counts as immobilized for Dangerous Ambush. Luna can also do this. Luna also has a charm, a debuff that immobilizes. The enemies are still moving, but your Dangerous Ambush full potential is unlocked. And those are just some endgame examples of where Dangerous Ambush gets activated without you even knowing it. Let's sum this up by looking at the damage again. Dangerous Ambush is working here. If you don't have any base skill power boosts, then please use Power Increase or Dangerous Ambush. That is flat 50 or 65% damage increase. For Immobility, it's very interesting because it doesn't mean that an enemy is immovable. Also, Immobility doesn't always trigger your Dangerous Ambush. It is very important that the skill or weapon has some effect that then triggers some debuff on the enemy, and this debuff then needs to do the Immobility status. Bypassing one of those steps or invoking the right effect just in the end won't trigger Dangerous Ambush always. If you've seen the full video, then you know there are exceptions, you know exactly how it works, so this is just a simplified summary of that. Or even simpler, the low-brainer, as we all know it. When you freeze, stun, stagger, daze and all the other things, then you activate your Dangerous Ambush. But also, plenty weapons and skill can immobilize. Skills have that written on them, some skills maybe were new today for you, and I guess no one is really thinking about the weapon impact that each bullet can have on an enemy, immobilizing it for a very short time, but still activating your Dangerous Ambush. And yeah, the big enemies get special mechanics, we know those from Colossus and from Onslaught, how those mechanics work and how to double our damage there, plus Dangerous Ambush on top. And yes, all of this took us almost 1 week of research and looking at all the stuff and trying things out. Increasing the damage even more was a bit much, but it was also fun to test. Some things worked instantly, some things were very wonky and strange to look at. But in the end, I hope that you got a good, clean summary now of all the categories of Immobilize, how they work together, and maybe you found something to increase your damage a little bit more. Have fun with that, good game, goodbye.